Welcome to the Infinity Academy from the Dice Gods. My name is Hydra, and today we're going to walk you through the basics of using the army builder for Infinity the game. Please note, this particular video isn't going to be about specifically building your army. That's a much more complicated and detailed discussion. Today we are just going to talk about how to use the fantastic army app made available from Corvus Belli. So one of the great things about starting Infinity is the wealth of free stuff which Corvus Belli gives us. On top of a complete set of rules available for download, there's the annually updated Infinity Tournament Mission Pack and, of course, the Infinity Army app. In this tutorial I'll be showing you how to use the app to make a list which is legal to the rules of the game and introducing you to some of the helpful features buried within it. I'll be using the web version of Army, but the phone versions for both iOS and Android work in much the same way, though there are some features missing on the phone app which we will be discussing as we go along. You will also find that there are two versions of Army, one for Code 1 and one for N4. For those unfamiliar with the two, Code 1 is a simplified version of N4. Consequently, I'll be using the N4 version as it's the more complex and complete. Code 1 has less features, so if you're using the Code 1 version, if you can't see what I'm talking about on your screen, then just ignore that part of the video. So, to access Army, head to infinitytheuniverse.com and click on Community at the top of the screen and select Army to get into the actual Army app. From here, select Infinity for N4 or Code 1 for Code 1. So we're going to hit N4. Next, you can make some changes to your view by selecting the options screen on the bottom right. We'll run through these more in a minute, but for preference, I like my unit menu vertically. You'll see why that's important in a second. And I'd also recommend that you put unit name ascending to the top, or we'll become clear on that in a moment as well. Range in inches or centimeters depending on how you play the game. Predominantly that is inches, and with the printing options just leave that alone for the time being, and equally with NA2 mercs. It's not something you really need to worry about at this point. Moving to the top of the screen, we have our first menu. First we have the login button, which is used to log you into your Infinity Tournament Series ID. From there you'll be able to upload your lists into tournaments when you play them and things like that. But if you're new to the game, really don't worry about that for now. Next up we have our charts, and in here you find the common charts which are used to track certain skills and abilities inside the game. As you can see, we've got martial arts, the booty chart, and the metachemistry chart. If this is early in your experience with Infinity, don't worry about these too much. You won't be using these in your first game, but it's good to know that they're there, and believe you me, they will be handy later on. Next on the list is the hacking chart, which covers all the different hacking programs that you have based on the hackers you have in your army. Like with the charts button, if it's early in your Infinity gaming career, don't worry about this. This will all come to you later. It's not really something you need to be concerned about, but again, it's useful to know that it's there. If you want to open a previous list that you've stored and saved, that will be under the folder button, and you'll be able to load based on the name that you've called them and the faction that they're in from that list. The next up button with the piece of paper lets you import an army code, and we'll cover those in more detail in a minute, but this is a really useful feature. It allows you to export a code when you've created a list, and anyone can put that code in here and they will see an exact copy of your list. This is great if you want to share ideas, push lists around between each other, or just move it between devices, which may be important later. Finally, we have the main menu button, which will take us back to switch between N4 and Code 1. Now it's time to get to the good stuff and start writing a list. As we're the good guys, I want to write a list for a Shasvasti sectorial army. If you've not seen it before, these images along the top are the badges of the main factions in the game. Under each of these buttons you will find a list of different armies called sectorials. The first army in any list is the vanilla army, which contains all of the different units for that faction. Underneath, you will then see a list of different sectorials. A sectorial army only takes a limited specific number of units from within the main faction, from within the vanilla list, giving them a much more focused playstyle, which is augmented with fire teams and sometimes being able to take units from other factions. As a rule, this makes most sectorial armies easier to understand as they lend themselves to a specific playstyle, but harder to master for new players as they lack the flexibility of the larger number of units available in vanilla lists. So we're going to go to Combined Army and select the Shasvasti Expeditionary Force. With the main window open, you are going to see on the left hand side a complete list of units, and across the top some filters, the menu, and our beloved options screen is still here. With the main window open, this is when we see why we put the menu on the left hand side and switched it to be in unit name order. Normally this list would be organized by the publishing order or the unit type. Now, whilst that's great, when you're new to the game, what you're going to be looking for is a specific name. So you're going to be looking for a Malignos. You're not going to know whether that's a skirmisher or whether it should appear in the list. By having this in a nice alphabetical order, you're going to find it a lot easier to track through and find the individual units that you want without having to know more of their background. That's why I recommend putting this into name order. Along the top of the screen on the left, you will see a menu consisting of filters by classification, characteristics, skill, equipment, weapons, ammo, or points. As you'd expect, this enables you to filter the units which have certain abilities or certain weapons or have a certain points value so that you can make easier decisions as you're going through. When you are building a list, you will build certain specialists into your list. They are necessary for completing missions. So if, for example, you wanted to include, let's go for paramedic, you could select paramedic and then see that you have a Nox paramedic option or you have a seed soldier paramedic option. Those are the only two unit types in the Shasvasti Sectorial Army which feature that skill. Likewise, if you wanted to go through and look for a hacker, same again. Here we go. Malignos, Cadmus, Nox, Noctifier, Mentor, Shrouded, good old Victor, or the Hydra. This speeds up your process when you're trying to make decisions about what you want and what you need inside your army. Equally useful for weapons. Looking for a certain type of weapon, you can filter on that. That becomes relevant when you are looking especially for things like D-charges, who carries them, always helpful. And also, if you have a certain number of points to fill, you can filter for that specific number. I'd love to say that you're often filtering for 93 points, but you'll probably be filtering for sub 14 and trying to find things that are equal to or cheaper than that particular amount, so you can just plug up those last few precious points into your list. So this buddy, this filter at the top of the screen is an absolute godsend, really helpful. Use it, it will save you time, it'll stop you having to remember where specific profiles are or which troops have specific loadouts. You can just filter for it and make your life a lot easier. If you hit the reset filters button, you reset the filters. What will they think of next? As before, we see along the top, the main menu remains the same, but we have this box has appeared. This is where your army is going to be built. You can change the name depending on what you want to call it. As you can see, here's some list names that I've given them previously, and this will define how it is called when you save it. So if you want to reload it later, that's where you can define how it will be uniquely named. Underneath that, you have the sectorial army that it belongs to, and then we have the max points. Most games of Infinity are played around the 300 point mark, but if you want to play a lower level, you can do that through here. You can enter it manually rather than clicking individually. So it's important to do that because as we build this list, the system will tell you whether it's a legal list or not. And if you don't have the correct points set in here, it can tell you that you're fine when in fact you're not. Moving across, we have SWC. SWC is your support weapons cost. That is where you pay for your heavy weapons, your super skilled dudes, and your unique flavor-filled bits that go into your army. As a rule, with M4, you will receive 1 SWC for every 50 points of army that you play. So if you're playing a 300 point game, then you will have 6 SWC. If we take a look at some Nox, where are we? There we go, just Vasti Nox troops. You'll see that in this list we have a guy with heavy machine gun, and his costs 1 SWC. A grenade launcher, equally 1, and a sniper rifle 1.5. Hackers 0.5, and a guided multi-sniper rifle, because you don't want to have friends, is 1.5 SWC. So this SWC limits the amount of crazy powerful units and special abilities that you'll have on the board, so keep an eye on that one. Points is the total number of points that you spent of the total amount that you have available. Underneath here we will get all of our different units as we add them into the list. So with that top bit established, let's actually add a unit in here so we can start seeing what's going on. So I'm just going to add a basic Nox trooper with a combi rifle. What you can see along the top here is we have the ability to add a new group. In Infinity, your army consists of a number of combat groups. A combat group can contain up to 10 auto-generating units, and after that you'll need a second combat group. Sometimes you will split your army into 2 combat groups yourself for different reasons, or even 3 if you're feeling crazy. There are reasons that you'd add another combat group, but for right now, don't worry about it. Equally for Spec Ops, don't worry about that. The first thing we see is this big red X. What that tells you is that at the moment, this list isn't legal. So if we click that, it will tell you that this list isn't valid because there is no lieutenant. Simple as that. No lieutenant, this list isn't right. Moving along this menu, we now have a bin lit up, which will let us completely reset this list and take it back to the start. This is the army code that we mentioned before. So if I wanted to send this list to somebody else, this huge long code here, I could copy, paste into an email or whatever, send to somebody else. They could input it into their army and they'd get a complete copy of this list consisting of a single Nox. Next up, you have the ability to export this list into the forums. So if you have the joy of playing around on different forums out there, for example the Infinity ones, then you'd be able to drop this list directly into that forum in a pre-formatted format. So we have the save button. This is where you can name and put comments against this list and save it for later review. This is one of the first differences between the web app and the desktop app. We have the ability to click this button and create what's called a open list. So when you are creating your list, you will have an open list and you'll have a closed list. The open list is what you give to your opponent and will exclude certain information, things they are not allowed to know. So if you have troops that are being deployed from space, airborne troopers, they're not allowed to know about those. Camo markers, they're not allowed to know about those. Who your lieutenant is, they're not allowed to know that either. So when it comes to giving out your courtesy list, the smiley face is what you click. That is not available on the app version of Infinity Army. Equally, the printed version, this is the full version that would be printed for you, so you can actually play. This isn't available on the mobile app either. This is only available on the web app. The other big button that's worth clicking is the Fireteams chart. I mentioned before that one of the big differences with sectorial armies is that they can take fireteams. This is where you can find out how you can build your fire teams, what they can consist of, and things like that. If you're a new player, really don't worry about fire teams for your first few games. You will use them a lot. It's one of the main reasons that you will take a sectorial army, but for right now, don't worry about it too much. Let's get rid of that. So that's the core of this, pretty much explained. When you have a unit inside of here, you can highlight, mouse over it and delete it if you want. If you are looking at a different unit and you want to see what a specific one that's already in your list is, you can click it again and it'll go back to the profile. When you are inside here you can click any of these links under special skills and they will take you through to the link in the FAQ system for Infinity, and it will tell you what that means. It'll give you the latest rules and the latest versions. Some of these are a little bit sparse because certain rules haven't been fully detailed or covered fully from N3 to the jump to N4, which is where we are now, 4th edition. So you may click them and find rules that are a little bit Spartan, but they should be more than enough for you to actually play. So with that said, you can run through and add units into your list as you see fit, building out your army. See, as soon as I added the lieutenant to this, we got a big green tick because this is now legal, even though we've only built the 100 points and 3.5 SWC of our 300 point list. That is a perfectly legal list to run. You can run through and add units to your heart's content, although be aware of this AVA number. This is your availability for units. So if you try and add 2, suddenly we get a big fat X because you're not allowed 2 Sheskins, which if you ever played against a Sheskin, you'll understand why. She's a little bit of a nightmare. When you have built your way up to 10 units in a list, then your 11th one will jump to a new group, just like that. If you want to move units between groups, you can do that. You can just pick one up, drag it, drop it, and move things back as you see fit. That's entirely up to you. But again, if you stick too much in, you're going to get the red X. Let's delete one of these, and then we can delete the other group, just like before. The next thing to know is that if you want to know the stats for the weapons that your troops are carrying, we have the weapons button at the top, which you saw before, but now we can click list, and it will list the weapons which are contained within the list that you've built. So we have, let's have a look, a Red Fury, and there's the Red Fury stats. Likewise, a heavy machine gun, and there's the heavy machine gun stats. So when you first start out, you'll have a complete list of every weapon that's in the game, which isn't so helpful, but when you've actually started to build out a list, you can see what those weapon stats are and how they fit together. You'll note that our status for this has now turned to an exclamation mark. That is because we have included a bounty hunter on a bike, which is only allowed in certain missions within the Infinity tournament system. So it's asking you to check to make sure that you have actually got that rule so you can take that unit, because otherwise it's not allowed. But that's a rare exception, which of course when doing a video you're going to include, obviously. But what I want to do as the last thing, just to show you the differences in lists, is I'm going to put a couple of shrouded in, and you'll note when you start getting close to SWC or points limits, units will turn red. That means you don't have enough points or SWC left to buy. That means you don't have enough points or SWC remaining to actually pay for those. So that warns you that those are not viable to grab. But what we've just done is grabbed ourselves 3 shrouded. Those shrouded are camo units, so your opponent doesn't know what they are. So if I look at my full list on here, you'll see that we have all of the Nox, including a lieutenant at the top there, and 3 shrouded. Let's cancel that. When I look at my courtesy list, there is no lieutenant marked, and the shrouded have disappeared because your opponent isn't allowed to know that before the game starts. That's closed information, so your courtesy list only tells them what he's allowed to see, which is not those things. So it's great the system does that automatically for you from the get-go. That is the basics of using Infinity Army. From here, if we save one of our lists and call it A, B, C, because we're feeling adventurous, we can then hit the open button, and there's ABC stored. I can delete it, I can see what points it is, I've got a little symbol for Chazvasti there, so I know what that particular list is. And that is the basics for using the Infinity Army. From here, it's useful to know more about the way the game plays and the way that models and rules interact with each other, so you can start building the lists that make sense within the game. It's great to sit down and just chuck things in here, absolutely, go for that, but just be aware that until you've played a few games and you've got a handle on the rules, it will be enthusiasm over wisdom. So there you have it. That's the basics of using the Infinity Army app from Corvus Belli. We hope that was helpful. From here, you need to move more into list theory, and in order to do that, you'll need a bit more of an understanding of the game. So our next step on the Infinity Academy will be walking you through the basics of playing Infinity, core skills, ideas and concepts, and when you have those in place and you know a little bit more about the way the game flows and plays, we'll walk you through the basics of army building and the theory behind making a successful list. For now, thanks as ever for watching. Please consider giving this a like and subscribing if it was helpful, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon.